Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. Once a month. That's all I can give you. Those were the words my wife dropped across the dinner table, like she was setting down a bill I hadn't expected. No hesitation, no guilt. Just a rule, delivered with the same tone she used when telling me to take out the trash. I stared at her, fork still in my hand, waiting for the smirk that would tell me she was joking. It never came. She sipped her wine, calm, as if she hadn't just stripped intimacy out of our marriage and turned it into a ration. For years, I had been patient. The excuses, stress, hormones, being tired. I had believed them. I thought if I supported her, carried the weight of bills, chores, her ambitions, it would all balance out. But this was different. This wasn't an excuse. It was a declaration. Once a month, like I was signing up for some kind of subscription she didn't care to maintain. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. Something inside me clicked, a quiet shift that changed everything. I finished my meal in silence, washed my plate, and went to bed without another word. She probably thought she'd won, that her boundaries had been set, that I'd simply accept them like I always had. What she didn't see was that my decision had already been made. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed for work, and slid an envelope onto the counter. Inside were the first papers for divorce. I didn't slam them down. I didn't wake her up to see the look on her face. I just left them there, next to her untouched coffee mug. When she finally called me at lunch, her voice was sharp, almost panicked. She asked what this was, why I was overreacting. She said I was being dramatic, that she just needed space, that intimacy wasn't everything. I listened to her scramble for words, excuses she thought would soften the blow. But my silence cut deeper than any argument. Finally, her tone shifted. Softer now. She said I was overthinking, that we didn't have to end things, that she still needed me. Hey, calm down, she said. I need you. But that wasn't love. That was convenience talking. The same convenience she had accused me of being when she rationed out her affection like scraps. That night, I came home to find her pacing the living room, papers still untouched on the table. She tried to smile when I walked in, tried to pull me back into her world. I gave her nothing. No anger. No begging. Just distance. She thought she had reduced me to once a month. What she didn't realize was that I was already gone forever. When I left those papers on the counter, I knew it would split our marriage wide open. What I didn't expect was how quickly the panic would set in. She tried to act casual at first, like she had control of the situation. She cooked dinner that night, something she hadn't done in months, and set the table like we were back in the early days. I sat across from her, eating in silence, and watched her hands shake as she lifted her glass. She talked about her day, her clients, even a funny story about her sister, but it was all filler. Every word was just her stalling for the moment she knew would come. Finally, she put her fork down and asked if I was serious about the papers. Her voice had that tremor I hadn't heard before, the sound of someone realizing the ground under them was cracking. I didn't answer directly. I told her I didn't make threats I wasn't willing to follow through on. The silence after that hit harder than a scream. The next morning, she woke up early, almost frantic. She made coffee for both of us, something she hadn't done in years. She asked if we could talk, really talk, about what we wanted. I let her words hang in the air while I checked my watch, finished my coffee, and left for work without giving her the reassurance she was fishing for. That was the first time I saw fear in her eyes, not because she thought I was angry, but because she realized I wasn't playing anymore. By midweek, she changed her tactics. Instead of arguments or explanations, she shifted to nostalgia. She left old photos out on the kitchen counter, ones from vacations where we looked happy. She messaged me in the middle of the day with memories I had long since stopped clinging to. Each attempt was calculated, designed to remind me of a time when she still had my devotion. But every message I ignored, every gesture I brushed aside, stripped her power away piece by piece. One evening, I came home and found her sitting on the couch with tears running down her face. She said she didn't mean it, that comment about once a month. She said she was just tired, that she didn't realize how much it had hurt me. She said we could work through it. I stood there listening, calm and detached. When she finished, I picked up the papers from the table, placed them back in front of her, and walked out to the patio without a word. Her tears weren't for me. They were for the control she felt slipping through her fingers. And in that moment, She finally understood. I wasn't the man who begged for scraps anymore. I was the man ready to walk away. The following week was when her composure cracked completely. She had spent days pretending she was calm, pretending we were just having a rough patch, but the truth finally surfaced. She started following me into rooms, trying to hold conversations I didn't want to have. She asked if I remembered our first apartment, how small it was, how we used to laugh about the neighbors upstairs. Her eyes searched my face for a reaction, any flicker of the man who once clung to her. I gave her nothing. When that didn't work, she shifted again. She started dressing differently around the house, clothes she hadn't worn in years, trying to remind me of who she used to be. It might have worked once, but now it just looked like desperation. I watched her moving around in outfits chosen for effect, but I stayed silent, unreadable. The distance between us was wider than any dress could cover. One night, after another failed attempt to spark conversation, she broke down. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom, tears in her eyes, and admitted she was scared. She said she couldn't imagine life without me, that she didn't know how to handle the thought of divorce. For the first time, she dropped the act completely. Her voice wasn't rehearsed anymore. It was raw, almost begging. I listened, but I didn't move toward her. I didn't reach out to wipe her tears. I simply told her I was tired and went to bed, leaving her standing there in the hallway with her fear echoing off the walls. That silence cut deeper than anything I could have said. The next morning, I noticed little things. The car she never used to fill with gas suddenly sat in the driveway with a full tank. My old habit, now hers. The laundry I usually folded was stacked neatly on the couch, her way of proving she could be what she had refused to be before. She was trying to reverse years of neglect in a single week, but it was too late. These weren't acts of love. They were acts of survival. By the weekend, she had stopped pretending entirely. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her voice shaking, and admitted she had been wrong. She said she didn't mean to push me away, that she thought I would always be there no matter what. She admitted she had taken me for granted. It was the closest thing to an apology she had ever given me. But apologies don't erase years. They don't change the fact that I had already let go. I didn't argue. I didn't comfort. I just stood, collected my keys, and walked out the door. She called my name, her voice sharp with panic. But I didn't turn back. For the first time, she realized that I wasn't bluffing. And that realization terrified her more than the word divorce ever could. The shift from denial to desperation was almost painful to watch. She had always carried herself with a certain confidence, a certainty that no matter what happened between us, I would bend first. But now that illusion was slipping, and with it, her pride. Every move she made was transparent. Every gesture reeked of panic. She began calling me during the day, something she hadn't done in years. At first, it was under the pretense of small things, asking if I had eaten, if I remembered an appointment, if I needed anything from the store. But beneath those questions was a trembling voice, a voice that wasn't really checking in on me. It was checking to see if she still had access to me at all. I answered in short sentences, polite but detached. Never angry, never emotional, just enough to remind her that distance was permanent now. At home, her efforts became almost humiliating. She cooked elaborate dinners she never used to make, waiting for me at the table with candles lit, pretending we were celebrating something. I ate the food in silence, thanked her, and went to bed early. She lingered in the kitchen afterward, staring at her own reflection in the window like she didn't recognize herself anymore. One night, I came home late to find her sitting on the porch steps. She had been waiting, arms wrapped around herself, as if she thought the chill in the air would soften me. She said she couldn't take the distance, that she needed me to talk to her, to tell her we still had a chance. Her voice cracked on that word, chance. I didn't argue. I didn't comfort her. I walked past her, unlocked the door, and went inside. She followed, close behind, still pleading, still trying to claw her way back into the position she had thrown away. For every word she spoke, I gave her silence. My silence wasn't cruel, it was final. The next day, she escalated. She reached out to my closest friend, hoping he would intervene, hoping he would convince me not to go through with the divorce. He told me about it later, shaking his head, saying she sounded like a completely different person, scared, unsteady, broken. It was confirmation of what I already knew. Her pride had collapsed, and now all that was left was survival. But survival wasn't love. It was need. And there's a difference. That weekend, she stood in the kitchen holding the divorce papers in her hands. Her fingers trembled as she looked at me, eyes red from crying. She asked if I really wanted to throw everything away. She said we could fix it, that she would change. I didn't take the papers back. I didn't tear them up. I simply told her the truth. I wasn't throwing anything away. She already had. And in that moment, the silence between us grew so heavy it felt like the house itself had stopped breathing. When her attempts at seduction and apologies failed, she shifted to a new strategy: pity. She started crafting a narrative where she wasn't the one who rationed out affection, where she wasn't the one who turned intimacy into a monthly chore. Instead, she was the victim of my coldness, the one abandoned by a husband who suddenly changed. It began quietly. Mutual friends reached out to me, confused, asking if everything was all right. They said she seemed fragile, said she had hinted that I was shutting her out for no reason. Some even suggested I might be going through a crisis. I let them talk, listened without defending myself, and gave them nothing. The truth always surfaces, and I didn't need to fight her lies with words. Her campaign escalated online. She posted vague quotes about heartbreak, about resilience, about being misunderstood. Photos of wine glasses at half-empty tables, captions about learning to heal. I scrolled past them with the same calm detachment I had learned to carry. To anyone who didn't know the full story, she looked like a woman wronged. To those who did, it was nothing but a performance. Then came the most telling moment. At a small gathering hosted by a mutual friend, she showed up looking deliberately fragile, hair loose, makeup smudged just enough to suggest she hadn't slept. When she saw me across the room, she approached with a trembling voice. She told the group we were going through a hard time, that she was doing her best, but I had become unreachable. The room went silent, all eyes on me. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply looked at her and said, "Didn't you set the terms?" The words cut through the air like glass. The silence that followed wasn't mine anymore. It was everyone else's. She froze, her carefully constructed image crumbling under the weight of her own choices. After that night, the pity she had tried to build began to evaporate. Friends stopped asking questions. Family grew quiet. And she was left alone with the story she had spun, one nobody wanted to listen to anymore. At home, the shift was obvious. She no longer had the energy to pretend. She sat in silence at the table, scrolling through her phone, glancing at me as if waiting for me to offer her a lifeline. I didn't. I let the quiet stretch until it became unbearable, because pity was never going to restore what she had destroyed. And every attempt she made only proved how far she had already fallen. The moment pity stopped working, she crossed into a territory I never thought I'd see from her: open humiliation. The woman who once told me with a steady voice that intimacy would be once a month only was now the same woman standing in front of me with tears streaking her face, begging for a chance she had already thrown away. It started one evening after I came home from work. She was waiting in the kitchen, the divorce papers spread out in front of her like a weapon she no longer had the strength to use. Her hands trembled as she pushed them toward me. She said she didn't want to sign. She said she couldn't. Her voice cracked when she whispered that she needed me, that she couldn't survive if I walked away. I didn't shout. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the table, and let her unravel. She went on about how she'd change, how she'd make things different this time, how she realized now what she had done. Each word was a brick she thought might rebuild what she had burned down. But all I saw was desperation, not love. She wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the comfort of having someone to hold her life together. The next morning, her humiliation deepened. She followed me to the driveway as I left for work, standing in front of the car, refusing to move until I rolled the window down. Her voice shook as she said she'd do anything if I just called off the divorce. Anything. I didn't answer. I let the silence hang between us until the weight of it forced her to step aside. Then I drove away, watching her figure shrink in the rearview mirror until she was nothing but a shadow on the pavement. By the end of that week, she had abandoned pride entirely. She knelt on the living room floor one night, hands gripping the papers as if tearing them up might change the truth. She begged me not to let her go, begged me to remember who we used to be. Her tears fell onto the pages, smearing the ink, but they didn't touch me. because every word she said was too late. I stood over her, calm and unshaken. I didn't yell. I didn't comfort. I simply took the papers from her hands, set them back on the table, and walked upstairs without looking back. For the first time, she realized begging wouldn't save her. The man she thought would always stay was already gone, and nothing she said could bring him back. When begging behind closed doors didn't move me, she took her desperation into the open. It wasn't enough for her to plead in private anymore. She wanted the world to see her pain, to pressure me into giving her the comfort she had already discarded. It started with social media. Suddenly, her page was flooded with late-night posts about heartbreak, betrayal, and losing someone who used to care. She uploaded photos of herself in tear-streaked makeup, captions written like open letters to the universe. To anyone who didn't know, it looked like I had abandoned her without reason. To those who did, it was just another performance. But the performance didn't stop online. At a family gathering, she showed up uninvited. I had gone expecting a quiet dinner with relatives, but the moment she walked through the door, the atmosphere changed. She made her way straight toward me, ignoring everyone else, her voice trembling as she said she just wanted to talk. The room fell silent. My relatives looked from her to me, caught between sympathy and confusion. I stayed calm. I didn't shout, didn't create a scene. I simply told her it wasn't the time or place. That wasn't enough for her. She raised her voice, asking how I could be so cold, how I could turn my back on the woman who had stood by me for years. Her words cracked halfway through, desperation bleeding through the performance. The silence in the room grew heavy, all eyes locked on her. That's when I leaned back, looked her in the eye, and asked one question. Didn't you already walk away first? The words landed harder than I expected. She froze, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. The weight of that truth hung in the air, undeniable. My relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. In that silence, she realized she had overplayed her hand. She left quickly after that, her face flushed, her performance collapsing in real time. Later that night, I saw another post online, a long rant about people not understanding her, about being abandoned when she needed love most. But it didn't matter anymore. Her story had holes, and people had started to notice. At home, the fallout was obvious. She stopped pretending to be strong. She stopped posting for sympathy. The only thing left was raw desperation. Every glance, every word, every action carried the same message. She had lost control, and she knew it. I didn't need to expose her. She was doing that on her own. All I had to do was stay silent and watch her world unravel piece by piece. By the time her public scenes started to backfire, the cracks in her life were no longer just emotional. They were visible everywhere. The woman who once set the rules, who once looked me in the eye and said intimacy was a once-a-month obligation, now stood on the edge of collapse. Her world was shrinking, and she could feel it closing in. I began hearing pieces of her unraveling from others, not because I asked, but because the truth has a way of surfacing. A neighbor mentioned she'd seen her sitting alone in her car late at night, crying into her hands. A mutual acquaintance told me she had moved out of her apartment after falling behind on rent. The image she tried so hard to project, independent, untouchable, was gone. All that remained was the reality she could no longer hide. Then one night, she came to the house again. No makeup, no performance, no carefully chosen words. Just a broken voice and trembling hands. She said she couldn't do it anymore. She admitted she couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't imagine a life without me in it. For the first time, she said it plainly. She needed me. Not wanted, not loved, needed. I stood there listening, calm, steady, detached. Every word she spoke was a mirror of the choices she had made. She thought rationing me, controlling me, would keep me forever tied to her. But what she hadn't understood was that need without respect isn't love, it's dependence. She tried to touch my arm as she spoke, but I stepped back. The look in her eyes when I did was something I'll never forget. A mix of shock, pain, and the dawning realization that I wasn't just angry, I was gone. She could still see me, still speak to me, but she couldn't reach me anymore. When she finished pleading, waiting for me to break, I gave her the same answer I had given from the beginning. Silence. No comfort, no promise, no hint of reconciliation. I opened the door, and this time, I didn't even look at her as she stepped out. The door closed softly, but for her, it must have sounded like a slam. Later that night, as I sat alone in the quiet, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a marriage ending. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own dignity, the part of me I had sacrificed piece by piece to someone who never valued it. And now, as she crumbled under the weight of her own decisions, I was freer than I had ever been. By the time winter set in, her life had collapsed in ways even I hadn't expected. The woman who once thought she held all the leverage was now stripped of everything she had tried to control. Friends who once pitted her had grown tired of her story. Family members who defended her choices stopped taking her calls. The sympathy she fought to gather had dried up, leaving her exposed. I heard she had lost her apartment, moving from couch to couch, staying with relatives who couldn't bear her presence for long. The same woman who rationed out her affection now depended on the kindness of others just to get through the week. Every detail reached me without me asking. It was as if the world wanted me to know how far she had fallen. One evening, I came home to find another envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a letter written in her uneven handwriting, pages stained with what looked like tears. She wrote that she couldn't handle life without me, that she had been wrong, that she finally understood what I had given her. She said she would do anything if I would just take her back. I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer I never opened again. Those words didn't belong to me anymore. They belonged to the man she had dismissed the night she told me intimacy was only worth rationing. That man no longer existed. That same week, I took the final steps. I closed every joint account, cleared the last of our shared possessions from the house, and filed the remaining paperwork with my attorney. No ceremony, no announcement, just precision. By the time she realized what I had done, it was already finished. She showed up one last time, her eyes wild, her voice frantic. She accused me of being heartless, of throwing everything away without a second thought. But the truth was simpler than that. I wasn't throwing anything away. She had done that herself. I was just closing the door she left open. When she realized I wouldn't engage, she broke. Her voice shifted from anger to pleading, from pleading to sobbing, until finally, she just stood there in silence. For the first time, she didn't have words. And for the first time, I didn't need any. I opened the door, waited for her to step out, and closed it behind her. No drama, no yelling, just quiet. That was the moment it ended, not with a fight, not with a reconciliation, but with silence that left no room for return. The final chapter of us wasn't a fight, wasn't a storm, and certainly wasn't reconciliation. It was quiet. A silence so sharp it cut deeper than any argument ever could. By the time the divorce was finalized, there was nothing left to say. I didn't celebrate, didn't announce it to the world. I simply lived as if the weight I had carried for years had finally slipped off my shoulders. The house was no longer haunted by her presence. I had redecorated, moved furniture, cleared out every trace of her. Where photos once hung, there were now empty walls, waiting for new memories. I didn't rush to fill them. The quiet was enough. For the first time in years, my home felt like mine. She, on the other hand, was left with nothing but echoes. I heard through whispers that she had burned bridges with family, exhausted the patience of friends, and was now living in borrowed spaces, clutching at stories that no one wanted to hear anymore. She had tried to paint herself as the victim, but the truth had seeped through every crack. People no longer pitied her, they avoided her. One night, months later, I saw her by chance in a grocery store. She looked smaller, thinner, like life itself had been grinding her down. Her eyes caught mine, wide, desperate, searching for even the faintest recognition. For a moment, she opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. She waited, hoping I would give her something. Anger, forgiveness, anything at all. I gave her nothing. Not cruelty, not warmth, just calm detachment. I pushed my cart past her without breaking stride. That silence, in that moment, was louder than any final goodbye. Walking out of that store, I realized something with absolute clarity. She had wanted control. She had wanted me on her terms. And when I refused, when I chose myself over her conditions, she lost everything. She thought she could ration love like it was currency, but what she never understood was that real love doesn't survive in scarcity. It either flows freely or it withers into nothing. Mine had withered long before I walked away. Now, I live without her shadow looming over me. I wake up lighter, sharper, unburdened. My silence has become my power, my shield, my answer to every wound she ever left on me. She wanted distance. She wanted rules. She wanted control. And in the end, she got exactly what she asked for. Distance. Forever. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.